Hey there Chumbas, Scimitar here, and today I will shortly explain why after 600 hours in ARPGs like The Path of Exile, Diablo 3, Last Epoch, Wolcen and couple others, I am now at over 600 more in Grim Dawn and counting, and to present you 6 reasons to play Grim Dawn in 2022. Let's roll. The atmosphere and world building. Long before I was able to fully master and evaluate the game mechanics, I almost instantly fell in love with the game world design. Unlike as with many other action RPGs where locations, even if looking beautiful, serve mostly as a background image for your grind, in Grim Dawn locations are making you to enjoy exploration of the world already because of the atmosphere alone, as well as being curious of how exactly they became so. The lab of a renegade necromancer that emits cadaveric vapors at every corner, the tomb of an ancient demigod filled with gigantic monuments hinting you ventured somewhere you shouldn't, cities of undead as ghostly and chill as their undying inhabitants, the living desert where dried out sands contrast with oases, or my two favorite ones, the Chthonic Void, a parallel dimension that feels like it came straight out from the Lovecraftian horrors, and the city of Malmoth that shows you the very word the game named at, a grim reality of once prosperous capital, now desecrated and overrun by monsters from another dimension. Every location of Grim Dawn is not just unique and distinct art pieces drawn by hand, no procedural generation here, but a place that's telling you its story by look and music alone, authentic to the bones. The character builds and devotion genius. In my opinion, Grim Dawn delivers the highest amount of viable character builds between any game of the genre, while also partially doing this in a truly unique way no RPG managed to. I made an emphasis on viable because of course there is a Path of Exile with its over 1300 skills available, with what no game can compete numerically. At the same time, the percent of actually viable builds is not as high as you may expect from looking on such a humongous skill tree, where most of the skills are practically a folding screen to create a feeling of limitless complexity over a practical implementation. In Grim Dawn, you build your character as a combination of any 2 classes you want from 9 existing, with up to 280 skills available to choose from. At the same time, the percent of viable character builds you can craft from this is probably highest between any RPG I have played, and that's already before Devotion steps in. Devotion is represented as 96 constellations with almost 500 skills in total, branched between 5 affinity types that you can invest up to 55 devotion points into. Devotion is totally separate from the class system, so you can invest into any constellation for any class. Yet, every constellation has a certain amount of required affinity points invested, so you have to think through which constellations you want to go to the ultimate ones. Many constellations also have so-called Celestials as the final skill, an active power that can trigger on almost any effect. Hit, crit, hit taken, HP levels, block, but also even more. It can proc from other procs, item skills, as well as spells and summons attacks. Something similar to the devotion system is something I would honestly like to see in more RPGs in general. It allows to build almost virtually limitless amount of character builds, and while not most but still important, visual representation of your character attacks on the battlefield. Another detail about devotion is unlike regular skill points that you gain from level ups, you gain devotion points from discovering and cleansing shrines placed throughout the game world, some in regular locations, some in hidden and challenging ones. So how fast you will get maximum devotion points amount is directly related to how deeply you dare to roam the world of Charon, which to me is a simple yet beautiful way to combine exploration and power gaming. This said, there is an alternative way to farm devotion points at the arena as well, which is good for twin characters that already did main storyline several times. You can also easily plan your character development using the calculator. I have dropped a link down below in video description. The story and narration are something you do not actually expect from an RPG. Aside from the quest-related dialogues, the game actually has huge amount of lore that you mostly find in form of letters, diaries, foliants, and other written text that slowly unveil more and more details about the in-game factions, locations, deities, and past events, which in many cases have shaped the current look of locations and factions themselves. The Grim Dawn's lore not just exists, discover it piece by piece in the game, it actually forms a solid, interesting image that's adding to the game atmosphere and even gives some space for theory crafting. There are multiple plot twists that many players will not expect, branching factious relationships with moral crossroads, and sometimes even different dialogues with the same NPCs depending on your class. For instance, at a few stages in the game, I was despising certain factions' principles so much that I ditched it, despite it having probably the best item of its kind in the whole game for my current character build. Or this little chat with a kid in a city of Malmot becomes different if one of your classes is a necromancer. The golden middle of balance. If you have experience with other modern ARPGs, it is pretty noticeable that Grim Dawn has generally a bit slower combat pace compared to most of those. This is a totally subjective take, but with some time invested into the game, it became an advantage to me. The thing is, with most of RPGs at some point, your character eventually becomes so good in being able inflicting various bursts of damage that even if there are some interesting or tricky abilities enemies have, most of the regular enemies will be just vaporized before they can do anything, becoming just a background sounds till you reach some boss or mini-boss in the area. While the Grim Dawn space is not generally slow by any means, it somehow found this perfect speed of the game that still keeps it on RPG level, but also still allows regular enemies to remind you, we exist and we still can disturb you if you will not predict, dodge or protect yourself against our special attacks. The game difficulty levels themselves are not just bigger HP and damage values, it is visible they are carefully crafted with your player experience difference for every of them. From normal to ultimate, you'll find yourself challenged and still respawning on every of those, at different times and situations. The main storyline though is generally easier compared to large amounts of special events, dungeons and quests you can obtain aside from it, making the main storyline not the only goal of the game in terms of power gaming, but a foundation for the large amount of further adventures of higher risks you can take on. So you know, if you want to just finish the game to see the storyline, it will not pack a super tricky challenge most of the times. But if you want much more and you want suffering, there is tons of this available as well. More on this in the next video section. Another aspect which Grim Dawn does better than other games in the genre is loot and items. While the RNG is obviously a holy grail of any RPG, as the grind in search of needed item through the loot tables is one of the main and enjoyable parts of the gameplay, Grim Dawn, while sticking to this principle, says, hey, what about it's still an RNG, but you have a certain bosses or monsters that have a low but a doable chance to drop a certain item you need. Those drops are not very often to meet, but given this small control over part of the grind, it gives you an extra layer of purpose, a clear destination in farming needed items, which for many builds also drop from enemies that's actually opposite to your general current build alignment, adding a tiny bit of immersive roleplay to the grind. Not only endgame diversity. RPG gameplay is all about grind and challenge, which should coexist in never-ending link. Hence, if there is no meaningful endgame content after you have finished the main storyline itself, that's quite disappointing. Happily, after you finish the main questline in Grim Dawn, it's only a beginning. featuring N+1 ways to explore and be challenged. One of my favorite endgame challenges in the game is Nemesis. Grim Dawn features lots of different factions. When you're doing quests for them and going through the main questline or farming monsters they oppose themselves to, you're gaining reputation with this faction, which allows you to buy better gear, consumables, crafting materials, and open new quests. At the same time, as there is also a faction relationship system, rising reputation with a certain faction will inevitably make some other factions hate you. In Grim Dawn, negative reputation has own perks as well. The more hated you are by the faction, the more often kind of hit squads will spawn in the game world to hunt you down in the areas populated by this faction. The pinnacle of these are Nemesis, extremely powerful bosses to fight. Nemesis bosses always keeps you alert and of course drop much better and mostly specific build min-maxing loot than the regular bosses do. In the game world, you can also access certain special areas and use specific items to spawn super bosses, which are devastatingly strong and can easily bring even the high-level legendary gear equipped character to their knees. Being able to beat those super bosses is a next level challenge, and once you will do so, it marks that you have achieved the extremely well built character that maximizes all its build synergy on 100%. Of course, there is also a large amount of openly available zones and multi-level dungeons in the game that have noticeably higher difficulty and monster mini-bosses density for a regular farming as well. Aside from those, there are two different approaches to the Endless Wave dungeon farm, Crucible and the Shattered Realm. The Crucible features multiple arenas at your choice or random ones, where you have to withstand endless waves of monsters and bosses with increasing difficulty. For every 10 waves you survive, the loot reward increases. You can grab the loot either after dying to the waves or stopping the progress yourself in between. There is also a small tactical element to use. You can use the special points collected for waves clearing to either buy devotion points or to place various defensive and offensive structures on the arena to help you with fighting. The Shattered Realm is the approach I personally like more. Every wave, you are getting teleported to a new area with different type of terrain and enemies, and have a limited time to clear it. As soon you kill enough enemies in time, you can proceed to the next area, and every few ones you enter the boss room. Same as in Crucible, the further you proceed, the better reward will be. The fights in both these game modes are incredibly fun to play and test your character build, as the procedural generation of levels, enemies and bosses will often result in most treacherous combinations you will be not able to meet in a regular walkthrough. But even aside from everything counted, there is still some extra faction-related challenges, hidden quests, secret areas and so on. To me personally, Grim Dawn currently has the most diverse endgame content between all modern RPGs. Yet it's not only the endgame that's shining in this game, it's all the same about the journey, not only the final destination. The regular enemies throughout the game's storyline are highly variative. There are dozens of zones which drastically differ in their design and look, and so are the enemies. Even the regular ones here and there can possess unique abilities and stats to take you off guard. And just the visual variety itself is keeping the regular progress fun enough. Additionally, enemies in different zones differ not only by their look and special abilities, but in their damage nature itself. Often when you are changing between the zones, you can notice that even regular enemies start to do tons of damage to you because of the different damage type, which requires you to either rethink your character build or at least get some temporary protection in form of consumables or item sockets. Lastly, there is a mutator feature, sort of a double-edged sword, a trait of monsters in the area, either in some special zones in the game world or during the Crucible Shattered Realm fights. The mutators make monsters to do more damage, be more resistant to some kind of damage, be faster or land crits more often, but debuff them in some other stance to counterbalance this. Mutators can stack. All these features combined are constantly keeping you in touch with the game, giving a need of keeping an eye on the enemy and reacting on the situational dangers in time. Community, developers and modding support. Despite the game being over 6 years old by now, it is still supported by developers. The latest update came out just in June 2022, and it was not some kind of minor update to fix a few bugs here and there. It introduces several hundreds of improvements, bug fixes, and rebalances to almost every gameplay aspect, from class and devotion skills to set items and loot. Grim Dawn 2 was also previously confirmed by the devs, but the estimated time arrival is currently unknown, as the studio is now focused on developing an own colony sim game called Farthest Frontier. The community of Grim Dawn, at least in my own experience, was extremely chill. Players on forums are welcoming newbies and not afraid of too many questions. There is lots of activity about trading items and so on. Modding support. I was actually surprised by this. There are all kinds of mods, from something like the interface tweaks and small changes to game difficulty. For instance, I find the multiplayer enhanced difficulty mod essential for co-op gameplay, to absolutely insane projects. For instance, there is a mod called Nydiamar, which adds a complete endgame campaign with multi-level dungeons that also can be played separately, and dozens of mods adding brand new classes to the game, and even mega mods like Dawn of Masteries that combine several most popular class mods and the gameplay enhancers into a single project, resulting in 47 new classes inspired by both Grim Dawn itself and other legendary RPGs. 47 new classes on top of the game's own 9. That's an absolutely limitless pool of creativity. 6 years after release, Grim Dawn remains to be a tasty piece in RPG cake, with at least 6 major reasons to play it. It handles several important game aspects better than other popular modern titles in the genre, and has nowhere else implemented unique system of a character building. The game hooked me for over 600 hours of grinding already, and it is nowhere near to the end of my interest, and hopefully you will enjoy it too. If you have enjoyed this review though and think about trying the game, you can support me at the same time, buying it in my personal game store. It will cost you the same as in Steam, but also throw me a few shekels at the same time. That's it for now, folks. Don't forget to hit that bell button and join our Discord to always stay in touch. Stay tuned, stay safe and stay happy. Scimitar Gaming here, signing out.